Do you want to officially introduce Jennifer?
We're all best friends at this point.
Yeah.
I remember a long time ago, back in the 80s, I believe it was, that we had our first bear talk with Ray Anderson, who was at the university at that time. The board decided actually last year that it was time to have someone else come to have another talk about black bears. And we tried to get Jennifer last year, but she wasn't able to come. She and I have been in contact one way or another for quite a while now. But we're very happy to have Jennifer Price-Tack with us tonight, talking about black bear research in Wisconsin. Her title is Large Carnivore and Elk Research Scientist, and she's also the lead data scientist with the DNR. She got her bachelor's and master's in Santa Barbara, California, and her PhD at Auburn. So I'm sure she's ready after all this trouble. Please enjoy black bears. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to thank you all for having me, for wanting to delve outside birds for an evening. And thank you, Bob. You did follow up this year. Last year, I'm going through my own. One of my projects is all about reproduction, right? And so I'm actually going through that myself. I've got a 16-month-old at home. So last year was a little bit hard to get me to come down from Rhinelander, but I'm so happy to be with y'all tonight. And hopefully I can share some interesting information with y'all. We can talk a little about research and answer any questions if you have them. I prefer to keep things casual, make it more fun and engaging. So if you have questions too, feel free to raise your hand. We can we can take this informally and make it maximum exciting for everybody. All right, so I titled my talk Bridging the Gap Between Black Bear Science and Policy at the Wisconsin DNR. You're all here right by point, so I'm assuming, do we have any pointers? Lots of pointers in the room? I'm seeing a little nodding. We have shy pointers in the room, is what I'm saying. Indeed. All right, are any Wisconsin DNR folks? Nope, okay, all right, that's good to know. I'm alone on my island. All right, well, so I'm going to talk about my research. Now, I'm in a unique position. A lot of research are housed within universities. I am in the state agency in our research branch. So I'll talk a little bit about the unique place that I'm in and how that really drives the research that I do, the questions that I ask. So we'll just jump right in then. All right, I'm going to start with just a little bit of bio. Bob told me that y'all are high level and probably know a lot about black bears already. So we'll go through this pretty quickly and then just jump right into the work that I do with the Wisconsin DNR. Here is the distribution of black bear. Now, these are one of many species that were extirpated or were eliminated from much of their historic range, but they are one of these species that within in the past 50, 60 years have rebounded and have spread to reoccupy a lot of areas where they previously were not. So that's an exciting story to share. Here in Wisconsin, we have a healthy bear population. We have over 25,000 black bear in the state. And this map here, yes, 25,000. So this map shows roughly the density where most of our black bear population core range, if you will, is in the northern part of the state. But the bear population has been expanding further south, into areas like this over the past 20 years or so. And really, it's not rare to see them almost anywhere in the state at this point. A lot of those individuals are transient. We have young dispersing males, and they haven't set up shop yet, but we do see them. It's not abnormal to see them all over the place. All right, a little bit about black bears. They can get big. Most black bear adults weigh between about 100 and 300 pounds. The biggest one on record in Wisconsin capped in at 780 pounds. And so that's a picture of this big guy here in Wapaka, Wisconsin. Right, and they can live a long time. The oldest known black bear was 39 and a half years old. So these are long-lived mammals. They're called black bear, but misnomer, they do come in different colors. I first worked with bear in Yosemite National Park, where they're much more often cinnamon and brown colors. And even in Wisconsin, we do see mostly black bears here, but they do often have white patches too. So the blaze on their chest. Torpor, or most people call it hibernation. This is not the hill I'm going to die on, but some people will die on the what is torpor versus hibernation hill, where hibernation is really something like a squirrel that goes into it over the winter, and body temperatures are depressed to near freezing, metabolic rates, all of that. I mean, these are like comatose animals. They aren't moving. You would look at them and think, is this even alive? Bear are different than that. They actually don't go that deep. It's called shallow torpor. That's I call it their flavor of hibernation, if you will. And their body temperatures decrease, their metabolic rates decrease, but not near as much. They are still able to move around. They're lethargic, but they are looking around, which means when I'm climbing in a den, they are staring me in the face. They are not asleep. So that's an interesting thing about bear. And their physiology is just so fascinating. In fact, we've had people from NASA come out who are interested in how they're able to be denned up that long, barely move, their muscles don't atrophy, they don't have any like chronic issues because of this hibernation. And you can imagine for NASA, what they're interested in is space travel. How do we send people to faraway places in the galaxy without having those physiological issues like muscle atrophy? So super cool. They go in, October, November, sometimes even December, and then will come out in March or April. Has anybody seen a bear den in this room? In person? All right, we have a couple bear den people. All right, their diet. So they're omnivores. They eat just about anything, including, greens. They do eat grasses and sedges, nuts and berries, carrion, insects, fawns, but they also eat a lot of anthropogenic food. I'll talk about this in a little bit, including they love a good bird feeder, garbage, and agricultural fields. They will literally plop inside of a cornfield and just pull corn stalks towards them, kind of like a panda bear. It's really diverse diets, and bears play an important ecological role. I'm sure this isn't a surprise. They are important seed dispersers. With their scat, they can consume tons of seeds and then travel long distances and disperse those. They aid in nutrient cycling. They help break down fallen logs, and then they dig up insect colonies. They're opportunistic predators. As I mentioned before, they will predate on young fawns, white-tailed deer fawns. And of course, they're culturally important here. The Ojibwa or the Anishinaabe people, their clan is the most populous clan in the state. So they have a huge significant cultural impact. And in the Ojibwe language, they're called Makwa. Wisconsin has a bear management plan. This is a 10-year plan, and this is the gist of it. This is what our agency tries to do for the public good. And that's maintain a healthy and sustainable black bear population that fulfills those ecological, social, and cultural benefits of bear, while also minimizing human-bear conflict. And does that in order to promote and maintain a positive public image of black bears in Wisconsin. So this is a challenging thing because the right number of black bears is going to be very different depending on who you ask in the state. So we're always trying to achieve a balance across diverse stakeholder groups. Here's a little bit about the agency. So up at the top, this is the Wisconsin DNR, and we have quite a few divisions. On the left is where I live in Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And then within that division, we have 6 different bureaus. First, I'm showing you wildlife management. That's the one that most people know about. These are our county biologists, our wildlife specialists. These are some of the specialists. On the left is Randy Johnson. He is my counterpart in large carnivore world. He works on the science statewide policy management side, while in contrast, am in our research branch, the Office of Applied Science. And then in the middle, we have our county biologist, and this is our local Portage County biologist, Lisa. So what does my branch do? This is kind of unique. A lot of states do not have a separate policy science branches. Most of them are one person trying to do all of it, which means that often the science is the thing that kind of gets pushed to the wayside, or there's not enough capacity to do both well, I would say. So our branch, we provide research and consultation services on statewide fish and wildlife priority issues. So our mission is to provide the best available science, and that's to help inform decisions and support those various conservation and management actions that the state is taking. What does that look like in the bear program? So here is the summary of what my program does. We provide scientific expertise to the Wisconsin Bear Advisory Committee, which is made up by many stakeholders, DNR biologists, and I serve as the advisor to that committee. They're actually meeting in about 2 weeks if you want to get a little taste of what it's like to make bear management decisions in the state. I serve as an advisor to that group. I'm a non-voting member, a neutral party. I act as an honest broker of information, is how I like to describe it. And my team, we run annual population analyses, including population estimates. We provide the best information on the status of the bear population. And then we provide projections or predictions on how various management actions, such as quotas, are going to affect the population and ultimately the population goals of the committee. My team also develops and implements bear research studies to inform knowledge gaps. So there's a research prioritization process within the state that identifies the questions that are most important for making informed decisions. How can we do better, right? So I will take that list and my team and I will develop discrete research projects to address those questions. And next, I also apply what are called decision analytics to bridge the science policy gap. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. My expertise is largely in quantitative ecology, but also decision analytics using decision science, which draws from a large suite of disciplines. So economics, mathematics, etc., even psychology, actually, to help people make better decisions. And that's how I try to bridge this gap between science and data and then policy and decisions. In my mind, and what we apply on my team is these decision science frameworks to help provide the structure to make sure that we are doing our jobs most effectively. What does that look like? Well, we structure decisions, and this is what a conceptual diagram about how we think about it. So first, what's the problem or opportunity? If you think about it, the only way to make change, the only way to make an influence is through a decision. You have to decide something to take action. And remember that even doing nothing, that's still a decision that we're making, right? So making decisions and thinking about what we do as decisions all of the time is a really helpful way to start structuring these decisions. All right, so first you have to identify what is the decision or what is the problem. Next, we think about what are the objectives? Why do we care about this decision? Why is it important? What are we trying to influence or maintain? We also identify performance metrics. How are we going to know that we've achieved what we're aiming to do? Next, coming up with a creative suite of alternatives, right? We can only take an action that's in our set of alternatives. So being creative there and coming up with diverse, really divergent ideas can help us also in the long term meet our objectives better. Next, consequences, thinking about, okay, given our options now, how do we expect that they're going to perform on our objectives? And which one of those alternatives is ultimately going to lead us to the best predicted outcome? Next, we talk about trade-offs. There's rarely a perfect solution that's going to satisfy everybody. And that's very much the case in the bear world. So how do we find the best balance? And then how do we use that information eventually to finally make a decision to move forward? What does that look like in the bear world? So here you can imagine that one of the main decisions that's made annually every year is how many bears can be harvested to meet a set population goal. First, we talk about objectives. What is the committee or what is the agency trying to achieve with this bear population? And here we have specific metrics or criteria that are in the bear management plan. And here they are. First, hunter success rates, creating opportunity, allowing hunters who wait 10 plus years in order to get a permit up in our zone B, which is like the area of the state that I'm from in Rhinelander. They're waiting a long time. What are their success rates? Also, hunter satisfaction. Satisfaction is not all about actually harvesting a bear. It's about the experience. Did you see bear? Did you have like nice weather, etc.? There are only certain things that the agency can actually affect that drive hunter satisfaction. Next, related to that is hunter crowding or conflict, agricultural damage, nuisance complaints, and then bear health. Are there any issues within a zone that are a concern, a red flag from a bear health standpoint? So these are the type of things, these are the predominant metrics that this committee will look at to determine what quota is most appropriate. So now we have our objectives. Next, alternatives. In this case, the alternatives are fairly simple. It's really what are the target quotas going to be in a given year and a given zone. But you can imagine that, there could be other alternatives, maybe restructuring regulations, maybe a split zone. Things like that are also could be considered. And I also want to point out, like, this is not science yet, right? These are social values that are telling us what do we care about, why do we care about it, and then what are our options. Science can maybe help, like me as a scientist can maybe come up with some alternatives that may be on the table for consideration, but this is not the role of science here to identify what we care about, what we're trying to accomplish. This is where I come in. So consequences table. Given what we know, given the alternatives, given the objectives, with the best information that we have from science, what do we predict is going to happen under those various scenarios? And in this case, we're talking quotas. So how are those quotas ultimately going to affect the bear population? And in the state, we use what's called an age at harvest model. And the goal here is to estimate the bear population and then again to predict how it's going to respond under those quotas. This age at harvest model estimates the most likely population size given the data that we have on observed bear harvest, and then also the sex ratio of those harvested bear. So we have this population estimate, we have the data that goes into it, which includes total harvest, how many individuals were taken, the age and sex of the harvest, and then also the starting population that we use. In this case, a population estimate that was obtained in 2011. Next, we have a model that we use, and this is just a conceptual diagram. It's a two-sex, so on the top we have females. Those arrows up top are indicating reproduction, and then underneath we have the male population. And not to go into this too deeply, but just to give you a sense of like what goes into this, right? So we have the data. We also have model parameters that we use. So we have harvest season and non-season survival probability. What's the probability a bear is going to survive for a year? Cub survival probabilities, pregnancy rates and litter sizes, and then harvest reporting rates. Excuse me. And this is the type of thing that we provide to the committee. So this is actually one of the population estimates over time. We have year on the bottom and then total population size. This is zone B, again, the area that I'm from, and we've had a very stable population over time here. So, okay, we've got the model, we have our data. Now, what are the steps to get from this information to making a quota decision or permit decision? First, we talk about zone summaries. We go through the data. We talk about the objectives, look at the harvest projections, and then the committee discusses permit allocation. I'll go through these really quick or fairly quickly. So first we have these zone summaries. And on the left here, you can see these are the metrics. These are exactly what are laid out in the bear management plan, what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to avoid. Success rates, we have the current status for a given year, but then we also have 4-year trends. So given this information, this summary, the committee is able to say, are there any red flags? Are there any reasons that we should be considering decreasing the population or trying to increase the population? So a lot of things we look at are largely, look at something like ag damage. Are ag complaints at a high level where we think that an increased quota might help reduce the population and potentially reduce that human bear conflict? Next, this is an example of the quotas, the quota scenarios that we provide the committee. So in this one, we've got on the left, you can see over time the population trend, the same thing I showed earlier, that's pretty stable. This first quota of 775, is an example of a quota that would allow the population to increase a little bit. The middle one is a quota that would maintain population stability. And then at last, we have one that would be predicted to decrease the population a little bit. And then, of course, we have error bars because no model, no data, it's never perfect, right? We can never have a perfect estimate. So we always want to be really explicit and transparent about the uncertainty in the estimates that we provide. So in all of these scenarios, we're providing the most likely outcome under the given quota. But given those error bars, you can see even with the quota of 775 here, there's still a chance the population could decrease. I think that highlights that we're human. We have very few levers that we can really manage. There are environmental factors. There are so many other factors involved that affect a bear population. So we need to be, we have to be honest about our limited ability to actually manage these things perfectly. All right, and so next this is where the committee will make a recommendation. They'll start discussing those trade-offs, given what they see in those summary tables, given the projections, what do they actually want to do now? What trade-off is going to be acceptable? Where do they find that balance? And here again, I just want to point out that this is not a science question either. We provide the information for them to discuss, but it's really values that are driving the decision. And I hit this hard because I hear so often science-based decision-making, like science will tell us what to do, but science cannot. That is a limitation of science. I think it's actually for the best, right? That science is neutral about which end of the spectrum we want to be on when it comes to bear population. So maybe on the left, we're trying to minimize bear conflicts. We want a smaller bear population so that we're not seeing those conflicts with farmers. They're not having as much ag damage to their fields, but there's also going to be less hunter opportunity. On the right side, we have a bigger bear population, but there's more ag damage that's concerning for ag producers. We also have more hunter opportunity. So what science can't do is tell you where you should be on the spectrum, which of those trade-offs are acceptable. Science can tell you how to get to either one of those or anywhere on any point along the spectrum. Just can't tell you which is right. That's a values question. That's a people question. Does that make sense? Does that resonate? Yeah. Yeah, so it always gets me like, oh, science, tell us what to do. Like, oh, yeah, question. This is great.
Said had the mostly stable bear population. Would it be an added information that would be helpful to have the bear quotas during those years?
Yes, and so what I didn't drown you in are the packets of information that we share. So we do have that information as well, and it is very important to see and to also for us to assess ourselves, right? Because we have the data on what the quotas were in the past, what the population was. Given the quotas that have been recommended and the harvest that we've seen, are we actually achieving our objectives? So yeah, really, really great point. All right, and then the final step, permit allocation. So here, there are the number tags as a target harvest, but we know that not every individual is going to harvest a bear. So what we do is we use a 4-year average in order to predict, okay, given the success rates of the past 4 years. How many permits can the DNR allocate in order to hopefully achieve pretty close to that target quota? So this is a really important step as well, because here the goal is to provide that opportunity to hunters, again, some of whom are waiting 10 plus years to get permit. So this is the last step. So here we have, this is zone B that I'm showing. Here's the harvest success rates. These are the different quota options. And then on the far side, we have the different permits that could be allocated based on the quota and based on that 4-year average success rate of 56.8. So here it is. Now they have the information. The committee goes through a process. They discuss it, make a recommendation, and then that goes through levels of approval all the way through the Natural Resources Board. Right. So that's a lot of the work that we do and the work that we're right in the middle of doing right now. In fact, the other part that I've talked about already a little bit is that we develop and implement bear research projects specifically to inform those knowledge gaps, to meet the questions that the committee may have or biologists may have that are potentially going to inform or change policy in the state. So I first want to touch on that there are a lot of ways to meet these research needs. Sometimes you don't need a new project and the data is already there. Maybe it's in another study. Maybe you can tap experts who can provide you with the information. There are approaches like adaptive management, etc. But sometimes we do need discrete research projects. So I'm going to talk about 2 in particular that are ongoing. We're in the middle of these projects, so I don't have, I don't have lots of results to share with you tonight, unfortunately, but check back in a couple of years. We'll have a few papers out by then, I'm sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a bear reproduction and diet study, and then also a project that we have evaluating abatement measures and how well they perform at reducing damage that bear caused to cornfields. And I'm also going to point out here that this is how the information is directly used. So this bear reproduction project is going to be updating, calibrating the model that we use to inform quotas. So this again is important because we want to make sure that we're providing the best, most reliable information that we can to inform that really important quota decision every year. For the next one, we're developing the decision tool, and we're going to be developing a tool that'll help the abatement program make better decisions about the measures that they're going to use. So for example, we may have cornfields that from our project, we can look at how it's laid out in the landscape. Maybe there's connectivity to a core bear range, and we can actually provide guidance on which abatement measures are going to be most effective at preventing conflict. So we'll go into the bear reproduction and diet study. So I'm sure y'all have heard UW-Stevens Point also has a bear litter project and puts out collars on sows. Are folks familiar with that work? Seeing a couple heads nod. No? Okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit about it, but I didn't want to go into as much detail in case y'all were already pretty familiar with the work that's going on, gosh, in your own backyard. So these are the goals of our project. First, we're trying to get zone-specific reproductive parameters. In particular, we're looking to estimate bear litter sizes in Wisconsin, cub survival rates, and then litter frequency. Again, to take that information and to update our projection models. We're also working with UW-Madison, and we've got collaborators down there who are taking samples that we have and analyzing diet of those samples so that we can quantify bear diets and better understand what they're eating. Finally, we're going to quantify and better understand how diet and reproduction might be linked. Are those bear that are sitting down and panda bearing it in cornfields also having more or greater litter sizes? Do they have more cubs? So this is some of what the work looks like. Upside down in holes. This is me, this is my field lead, Aaron. The two of us are upside down trying to access a sow and who had 4 yearlings in this case. Right, yep, yeah, I wish she did. Yep, so this is a lot of what we do. We rely on the public to provide us reports of where bear dens are located because my team is small, there are 4 of us. And so you can imagine that us trying to go look around for bear dens would be infeasible, impractical. So we do rely on the public to provide us locations.
Well, what exactly are you doing when you're looking in there?
Yes, yeah, all right. So there are multiple steps to this process. The first thing that we do before we bring out an entire crew is we go assess it. We say, okay, are there bears in this hole? And is it a den that we can get into and that we can safely get the bears out of? That's like the first thing. Safety is always first. Safety for the people on my team and for bears, and then data. Absolutely every time. We could not get any data, but if everybody, bear and people included, leave that day healthy, it's a win. So then when
Den's always in a hole. Crap.
No, they're not. It's so interesting. They use a lot of different locations. Some individuals just plop down in a cornfield and they're like, we're good. We're good here. Mostly large boars, but sometimes sows. The most common denning situation that we see in the state, they're associated with downed trees. So root balls, etc. We do see brush pile bears. We've seen, they use caves. In southern regions, I've talked to my southern counterparts, they often use hollowed out old trees. So they're actually climbing. The people doing den work there are actually using climbing equipment to get up and to be able to inject the bear from up above, which is wild. So this seems less crazy when you think about it relative to climbing trees. But yeah, so this is a lot of time what it looks like. This one is a little unique. We actually have 2 entry holes, which is really convenient for trying to immobilize multiple bears. And then we have a 6-foot syringe pole, which is our primary tool. So we'll go in there with a couple people. We always have safety people on feet. If you kick, you get pulled out immediately. That is the safety protocol in this case. But they are lethargic, so we go in there. I told you before, though, they are not fully asleep. They are aware of us. They are looking at us. So we try to get in and out as quickly as possible because if we take too long, they'll get much more stressed. If we do inject them, they could burn through the drug that we give them. That adrenaline will help them burn through that immobilization drug. And that also becomes less safe for us. And we have had a few dens where we pulled out and said, you know what, we think this bear is too agitated. It's not worth it. We'll come back another day or we won't. It's still a win, ultimately, as long as everybody's safe. So that's what we do. We go in, we'll inject. If there's a mom with yearlings, we'll inject the mom first, wait for her to, go down because she's the biggest safety concern there. And then if there are yearlings, we'll typically inject them as well. And that's because we want to keep it controlled. We want to keep them together. We don't want an individual bolting and potentially getting separated. So we'll do that. We get all the animals out and we're monitoring vitals the entire time. So we have people that are on each bear, making sure they're breathing well, making sure their gums are pink, all of their vitals are appropriate. If we have any issues, our immobilization drugs are very safe. They have a wide range of safety, but we also are able to reverse it. So part of the drug we give is reversible. If we see anything we don't like, we'll inject the bear and then back off. Call it a day again. Still, safety first, always. Not stress that enough. Because I gotta sleep at night, and I'm not gonna sleep if I feel like we made the wrong choice or did something that wasn't a safe, responsible choice. Because this is, these things seem fun, right? And they are. It's a very fun day, but there's a lot of responsibility here. We care about these animals. We don't want anything to go wrong. We don't want any bears to get hurt. And you can't fully reduce the risk to 0. There's always going to be a risk involved when you're handling projects like this. And we don't do this lightly either. So We only will do handling projects if we know the data is really valuable. We try to use non-invasive techniques as much as possible. I use a lot of genetics from scat or from hair samples, etc. So this is a pretty unique project where we do actually need to follow the same individuals over time. And that's so that we can get that litter frequency estimate that we're interested in, and also the cub survival rates. So we'll check these guys, and then we'll check mom again this year and see how's she doing. Did she have another litter? How many cubs does she have this time? So we follow these individuals for several years, and then at the end of the project, we'll remove that collar. Any questions about it? Yeah.
Do they go back to the same den next year?
Very rarely. That would make my job so much easier if they would just cooperate. But no, they typically make a new den every year. We have very, very low reuse rates, like under 5%, I would say. Any other questions?
Check the next year and see what kind of litter they might have had. You have to know that it's the same bear.
Yes, so that's we put a collar on the females, the adult females. They get a collar, and then we're able to locate her in the next year. So it communicates with the satellite, so we get GPS locations. I can literally pull up a map and check on them at any time. And then they have the VHFs, like the old radio telemetry. We still use that, and we'll use that to locate our bear every year. So my team's going out, they're starting in 2 weeks to go find our collared bears, figure out where they're denned up, and make a plan for the new den surveys. Yeah, good questions.
Do they stay in the same area or do they wander miles and miles apart?
Yeah, so largely they stay in the same area, especially females have smaller home ranges. They're about 7 square mile, whereas a male is about 26 square mile and covers several females. But they do make journeys, and we've actually had our females. We had one denned up in Bayfield, but has now moved on and is denning up in Minnesota. So she decided she doesn't want to be a Wisconsin research bear and left the state. Like, So we'll talk to our biologist counterparts in Minnesota and see if they want to go check on her for us this year. Yeah, this is great. Keep them coming. Any other questions?
So based on your population data, can you estimate how many bears there are in Portage County?
Ooh, not as granular as Portage County, unfortunately. But I could give you like a wide range. Not tonight, not right now, but absolutely.
Since most of what you're doing is based on population density, how do you get that? I mean, there's a lot of controversy in this state with the wolves and deer, et cetera. How do you guys come up with your numbers?
Yeah, so it's that agent harvest model. It's a reconstruction model where we're able to use the harvest data to reconstruct what the population was. And so every hunter is required to submit 2 teeth. One of those teeth goes to Matson's laboratory, which takes that information and actually can give us an age from that tooth. And it's like tree rings where they actually are counting what are called cementum annuli that are laid every year. So it's just like a tree ring. Yep, and using that information, so using that sex and age structure and some other parameters that we have, we're able to reconstruct what the population was based on the harvest. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do the males have their own den, or do they go with the female?
So they go separate. The males and the females really only interact during breeding season, which is in June-ish. So a female, she'll get pregnant in June, and they go through what's called delayed implantation. So she won't actually be pregnant. She'll be holding on to that embryo and then implanted in fall. So that then she can have her litter over the winter in her den. She comes out of the den, she has those cubs, and she'll nurse them, take care of them in the den. They leave, and then they'll stay with her for the next 1.5 years. She'll kick them out so they'll den with her the second year as well. So those are the yearling dens that we visit. Stay with her, and then she'll kick them out and get ready to breed again in that following June. Yeah, so for like a mammal species, they young stay with their moms for much longer than most. And they're great moms. There aren't many better moms than a mama bear.
You mentioned a couple times that they impact agriculture. Is that primarily corn or are there other crops that they impact?
Corn is the number one crop that they depredate, but another really big one are apiaries, actually. So they,
Oh, yeah.
just like a Pooh Bear, they do like honey and cause a lot of damage. So that's actually, we have individuals just about, gosh, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that joined the Bear Advisory Committee that are representatives from the apiary industry. So now they're represented and they get to have discussions and contribute to bear policy.
My husband and I were beekeepers for over 20 years. And we had bears visit every apiary site we had in Georgetown. So.
Right? Yeah, the cartoons get it right sometimes.
But it's not necessarily the honey they're after. They want to go into the brood chamber and they want to eat the larval bees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, it's an amazing source of nutrients for them, the protein, sugar. Absolutely.
A complete one.
So did you have to use electric fencing or anything? Yep.
And then DNR has a fund that would provide the battery and the electric tape.
Mm-hmm.
Fence and it worked great.
Great, yeah, there are solutions. It's great that there is a damage program to help people like y'all that can help reduce conflict and ultimately let us live better with bear populations.
Farmers reimbursed for the crop damage?
So it is a complicated system-ish, but they do have to enroll in the program. And one of the biggest things that comes with that is that in order for a corn producer, for example, to enroll in the program, they have to open up their property to hunting. So that is like one of the main stipulations. And there's also, they do get paid back, but there is a $10,000 cap on those repayments.
Do you lose many of the collared bears to hunters?
We do lose a few every year. It varies. This year we had 2 of our bears harvested. And we don't ask hunters to not harvest our bears because we are interested in the survival data, right? So we're hoping that they'll treat a bear just like one of our collared bears, just like any other. However, it is illegal for a hunter to harvest a bear that is accompanied by cubs. So newborn cubs. And so that is in theory protecting sows that have young cubs. Yeah.
Is the current season over? I heard something on the radio.
It is.
Something about the quota was surpassed.
Yes, so it was, the season is over and across the zones, there was an exceedance of the target harvest. But as I was showing you earlier, right, we're using averages with those success rates. So inherent in the process that's used to allocate those permits, we expect that we're always going to be wrong, right? 50% of the time, the realized harvest will exceed what the quota was, the target was, and 50% of the time it's going to be an under harvest. So that is just an inherent, outcome of the process that's used. That has been highlighted as something to discuss, and I expect that in 2 weeks when we meet with the Bear Advisory Committee meeting, they are going to talk like, is this process really what they want? Are there other ways to potentially use a process where there would be a target that would not be exceeded? And those are really big political and social conversations to have.
Jen, can you hear me? Hello?
There's research being done to put something on corn.
No, she won't hear you on there, so you can
Things.
type your question.
The corn,
Ooh, yeah.
you know about that? Is there any research?
There is
to deter
currently.
the bears from eating
Yeah, so crane caused a lot of ag damage too, for folks who aren't aware, although I'm sure most of us have seen them in cornfields or in soybean fields. There's a lot of experimentation that's going on, but I wouldn't say like a real structured research project at this point. But sometimes we can answer questions without needing a really big research project as well. So I'm not up to speed, unfortunately, on what all they're trying within the damage program.
Yeah, what would be an average litter of young? Is it like 2 or 3? Or-
Yes, so usually 2 to 3. The most that I've ever heard reported is 6 wild. That was not in Wisconsin. I can't remember which state that was in. However, we've not seen that. I've gotten pictures of Sow as a female bear with 5 cubs in Wisconsin. So that is rare, but does occur. But we're usually looking at 1 to 4, where that 2 to 3 range is average. And usually a female, she'll start reproducing maybe like 3.5, 4.5 years, depending on her nutritional condition. She'll have a smaller litter that first year, but then after that, you know, when she reproduces again in 2 years, usually her litter will be bigger, and usually the litters stay fairly constant after that.
There was a question online asking, just clarification. Did she hear correctly that roughly 50% of the time the harvest quota is exceeded in Wisconsin?
That is correct, but it is not a quota like we think of, you know, you think quota and you think that's the top number that can be harvested. And then, so it's not actually a quota in that sense. It's a harvest target. That is that is what we're expecting. That's the predicted harvest based on those 4-year success rates. But because we're using an average, we're inherently going to be, you know, it's off. It's 50% of the time going to be a little bit above the target, 50% of the time below the target. We do look across years and make sure, like, are we actually achieving that? Over time, are we close to that 50% or close to the target harvest over time, which we are. And for example, this year, the target was exceeded, but last year, in most of the zones, we actually had less than the target quota achieved. So again, we're looking at the law of averages over time, and I'm not saying it's a perfect system, and you know, I think it does cause a lot of. It's harder to communicate. You know, it's really concerning when you think like, oh, it's gone above what the target was. So there will be discussion about should it change.
So the sky's not falling in.
Yes, correct. We figure we're going to exceed it half of the time.
Does the use of hunting with dogs factor into any of your decision making?
Yeah, and I guess in what sense?
No, does it have anything to do with, I guess, success?
It does, and so it factors in there. That's why we use a 4-year average, because every year it alternates whether or not doggers get to start first or baiters start first. So there is that offset every year, which we capture in that 4-year success rate. But imagine, like, success rates are really tough because people are harder to predict than anything, you know. What are success rates going to be? It depends on, like, if you get a tag, did you hunt first and foremost? Did you try to hunt? If you did, how much effort did you put out there? And then if you saw a bear, did you take the first bear? Did you wait for another bear? And then finally, you know, did you harvest a bear finally? Did you report it? Do we have the data on it? There are all these steps in between that we don't have specific, or we don't have concrete data on. So we do the best we can, but the DNR only has like a couple levers to pull.
When you harvest a bear, what all can it be used for? And use the meat and the
Yes, so most people do consume their bear. Yes, most people do. A lot of people also will have them made into rugs. Those are the most predominant uses of bear. You were referring to them.
As far as hunters, when they go hunting, they can take any bear without cubs. They can't take the cubs and
Right.
but you can't tell male or female probably from a distance. And if there are no cubs with the adult bear, it's okay to take it, male or female, right?
That is correct. Yes, so there are likely cases where a sow that has cubs is harvested because her cubs are not with her. Maybe she's left them behind temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then one more. I have some more slides too after this if we want to keep going at all.
What kind of information do you garner from the DNA in bird?
Thank you for the segue into some more slides that I have. But first, real quick while I'm getting loaded up.
All the information you're giving us is really pretty sophisticated. How long is this program going on?
Ooh,
Sophisticated research.
sophisticated research. You know, I would have to look back, but I think the 70s or 80s. But our research branch is a lot smaller. It did shrink a few years, like 8 years back or so. There was a reduction in the research branch specifically, but just the DNR in general has actually shrunk over time. Capacity is a real big issue for us and a lot of government agencies. So we have 7 full-time scientists that work on wildlife issues. Excuse me, my voice is coming in and out.
Jen, there are a couple
Okay,
questions.
so let me share a few more slides and then we can take some more questions. Here's just an example, you know, this project, because we work with landowners and people who report the dens to us, we do offer an opportunity. We keep these groups small, but this is a case where there was a den in their backyard. They had us out, they allowed us to complete a survey, and we brought them out and allowed them to watch and then help us keep the cubs warm. It's an important job. They do go in jackets in order to help them because they can't, they're babies, they can't thermoregulate as well as an adult bear. So rough job, I know. Absolutely. And they wear masks. That's for protection for the bears because they're, again, young, have underdeveloped immune systems, and we have things that could pass to them disease-wise. So we always try to minimize any potential damage that we're passing zoonotic diseases on the cubs that we handle. All right, this is where I'm getting into some of the bear hair work. Thank you for helping out with that project as well. It's really a critical project. So quantifying bear diets. So this is something that we are doing in collaboration again with John Pauly down in UW-Madison. And we're interested in particular in how much are bears using natural foods versus anthropogenic food. There was a study probably 10 years ago now, excuse me, by Rebecca Kirby that in a small area in Iron County, Wisconsin, found that bear diets were comprised of 40% human food. This was in an area where there wasn't much agriculture. And so the thought was this has got to be maybe refuse, maybe baiting, etc. So we were curious, is that an anomaly or what are the patterns of human use in food or human use? Thank you. Now, I blame it on daycare. So yeah, we wanted to see, you know, what do bear diets look like across the state? And so those hair samples are very valuable because we can use what are called isotopic signature analyses that look at signatures in nitrogen and carbon, and we can trace that back and begin to tease apart what kind of foods these bears are consuming. So here, I don't know which one was yours. Can you put one of these are all the hair corrals that were put up across the state. There were 844. So a huge effort with landowners, with biologists to put up these hair corrals. And these are some of the preliminary results. This has been submitted to a journal, but is not accepted yet, so still preliminary. Check back with me, hopefully we'll get accepted in the next couple months. But here's what we're looking at. Up top, this is natural food, so about 55% of bear diets across those 844 corral traps, about 55% is coming from natural forage, so hard mast, soft mast, grasses, sedges, etc. Which means that we do indeed have 40% of bear diet that is coming from other sources. So in particular, we were interested in teasing apart types of anthropogenic food. They're not all the same. Some of anthropogenic food is corn again. So we were curious in teasing apart and trying to better understand if they are using anthropogenic food, what foods are they using and what's that composition? So here we have intentional subsidies. These are things like bird feeders. These are also bait piles that the hunters are using. And then we have, I'm sorry, this is unintentional. Intentional is the bait. I apologize. So this is the intentional subsidies. And then we have unintentional subsidies. So that's corn, that's trash, etc. So what you can see is that bear are still largely using natural food, but a pretty substantial part of their diet is coming from people. And I think this is kind of a cool graph. So there are a ton of bars here, right? And every single bar is a different hair sample. And so what you can see is that, I showed you that graph before, but now you can see that there's a lot of differentiation here. We have a lot of bears that are largely using natural food over on the left here. But on the right, we have all these bears that, I don't know, call them, maybe they're the dating bears, I'm not sure, but they are really utilizing those anthropogenic food sources. But then most bears are in the middle, using about half natural and then half human food. Super interesting. So this is the first phase of this project, but we're already learning so much about what bear are eating in our state. And here's just a graph that shows you where we're expecting these intentional food subsidies. And it's nice when research shows you what, things that make sense, right? And this makes sense because we have intentional food sources, that's like bait, for example, again. And it's in the forested areas. It's in areas that we're expecting that people are harvesting bear. Versus the unintentional food source, a lot of this is agriculture, that matches as well. We're talking major agricultural region. This area of the state, this is bear zone D. D is for damage. We have the most bear damage in this area of the state. And in fact, Wisconsin is one of the abatement measures. We contract out with USDA Wildlife Services, and those folks move a ton of bear every year out of cornfields, out of problem areas. And by a ton of bear, I mean over 500 bear a year are captured in culvert traps, and then they are driven over to forest lands or some kind of like public land and re-released. All right, and I don't know how we're doing. How are we doing for time, y'all? It's already 8:13. Oh my gosh. We did start late.
About 10 minutes.
Do you want a couple more slides or we can just roll right into questions? Okay, people want to keep hearing my poor voice, so let's do it. All right, tools for managing bear. We've talked a lot about ag damage already. And I just talked about trap and translocate over 500 bear. These folks are paid bear chauffeurs. That's what I call them. But they're doing amazing work, reducing conflict and allowing us to live more or coexist with bears more effectively. They're also technical support. More often than not, technical support resolves conflict. It's, hey, do you baby have a bird feeder up? If so, maybe take that down, or maybe just lock up your trash if you can. Those type of things go a long way to help reduce conflict. There are also shooting permits for ag producers, particularly in areas where the agricultural damage is chronic. There are shooting permits, trap and translocate, and then of course harvest. So this is a project that we also have ongoing. We're in the middle of it right now, where we're evaluating these different abatement measures. And in particular, we're looking at the abatement measures that are implemented at a field. So we're looking at that trap and translocate. We're looking at shooting permits and then a combination of the two. Some of the questions that we're asking, how effective are each of those? But also, are there landscape characteristics that are correlated with damage? And could understanding the relationship between landscape, between habitats and damage also help us to improve and more proactively deal with some of this conflict and reduce the likelihood that a bear is going to cause damage in the first place?
Is that typical bear damage in a cornfield?
This is a pretty bad one, but yeah, this is what bear damage looks like. Just imagine, they sit, they pull. It's a lot of really good food, and they're particularly damaging during what's called the milk phase of the corn. Do we have any corn producers here?
Are there any crops they could grow that bears wouldn't just love to eat them, like they love corn?
Corn is their favorite. I mean, soybean,
So
even soybean, they don't, we don't have issues with soybean. But corn is oh gosh, yeah, just bear love corn. Another question that we have that we're trying to address is, do unenrolled fields that are near enrolled fields benefit from abatement? So it's the spillover effect. If we do implement abatement measures on this farm, is your neighbor also getting the benefit, but potentially not having to open their field up to harvest? How are we doing this? How are we going to answer this question? Through a lot of aerial survey work. So many photos of cornfields. Don't even know. My team is processing these currently. So this is what it looks like. We have all these circles, and here within each circle, we've got cornfields identified. We have pilots go and they fly these cornfields for us. And we do this twice. We do this in September and then again in October. Here's an example of a picture that we'll see that they'll send us back. Some of these are not, all these holes are not bear damage. Some of these are like skipped rows or things that are involved with planting, a permanent planter. But these giant holes up here, bear damage. And bear damage is really clear too. A deer does not do that. They'll pull break stalks, but they won't just absolutely pull everything down to ground level. I know, you're never gonna forget that, right? Like just panda bearing it out there. Yeah, so this is the type of thing we do. We bring this in a GIS software system, and then we geo-reference it, and we're actually able to draw polygons for this hole and get a very accurate estimate of how big of an area has been damaged. So that's the kind of thing we're doing right now. All right, so bringing it back, wrapping it up now. These are the things we're doing. We're pretty busy. My team is passionate, hardworking, and just really excellent. I'm very fortunate to not only work with such a captivating critter, but also just an incredible team. I hope I've also sold you a little bit on this idea of like decision-making frameworks, like structuring our decisions and really thinking critically about what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to avoid? What are the metrics of success? Coming up with creative solutions and then using science to help us evaluate those options. It was really a powerful, powerful tool to help us achieve our goals. And with that, I've got a couple videos. I can just send this out by email too, so y'all can like view it at your leisure. Wisconsin Life, PBS, came out with us last year and did a really nice piece. They followed us around for 2 days taking video, and it's a nice 5-minute segment that I can share with y'all today. And of course, report your dens. If you know of a den, if you hear of a den, we are taking them all over the state and always interested in including additional sows in our study. And if you report a den, we would invite you and 2 to 3 other people to come join us, assuming that it's a den that we can survey. And I'll send this as well, so I'll follow up. That sounds good. The link to report bear dens and to this PBS video. With that, yeah, thanks. I will wrap it up here and we can talk a little bit more if y'all have questions.
Yeah, there was a question online again. The question is from Alex and they ask, in your opinion and based on your experience, what would you like to see change regarding managing the bear population? And can you comment on the Wisconsin bear hunt and bait policies as it compares to other states? Good question.
Ooh.
What would you like to see change? And then comparison to other states.
Sure, yeah. So, I am the scientific advisor here. As I said, I'm an honest broker of information. At these committees, I don't vote. I don't voice, my policy opinions are my own. I will say I wish we had more capacity as an agency. That is really a struggle for us. So that is what I would change, capacity. And my team having things like paid time off and some benefits. Maybe that's what I would say.
In Wisconsin, do you think over the last 5 to 10 years, is our black bear population getting larger or getting smaller?
Yeah.
Or
that's a
staying the
good
same?
question. It is, so the population has expanded. We have bear in areas of the state that we did not have them before. I think the overall population has been fairly stable. In recent years, maybe a slight decline, but a lot of that was driven by more aggressive harvest in that zone D where all that agricultural damage was located.
Are bear territorial?
They are bear territorial. Yes. And although I think it's really, here's a little extra than just yes. Females, so a sow will kick out her male cubs once they're other yearlings, once they're about 1.5 years, right? They'll disperse, but she'll actually tolerate her female cubs and sometimes even carve out some of her home range to share with them. I think it's pretty cool.
When the bears are transferred or translocated, then how do they develop, or you follow them to see how they succeed in a new territory, or how long does it take them to establish?
Yeah, great question. And we don't follow them. So we don't have any of them collared, and I can't really speak to exactly what they do. Some of them probably return right away, and then some of them may wander for a while. I think they're all individuals. I wish I could answer that better.
I've heard it said a lot of times that if you get between a bear and her cubs, you're in big trouble. Is that true? And how bad would it possibly be?
Sure, they are very protective of their cubs. I would not recommend doing that. No.
Well, if it were to just happen, you know what I mean? If you're walking somewhere and
It's so dependent on bear. Some bear are quickly aggressive and some are not. Overall, black bear are much less aggressive than like a grizzly bear. I would be scared to death between cubs of a grizzly bear and a mama. But black bear, I would get out of there real quick. I mean, I wouldn't chance it, but it's less risky than a grizzly bear. So don't try it. Nobody do that. Get out of there, because they are, that's their offspring. They're very protective, and they could absolutely get really aggressive really quickly if they feel like their young are being threatened. More likely than not, with a black bear, what they're gonna do is mom is gonna send the cub up a tree. And I've seen this happen quite a bit. Cub goes up a tree, that way it's safe up there. Just saw that in Yellowstone like 2 months ago, actually, with a bunch of tourists scaring this poor mother with her little yearling cub.
I have a personal question. did you, steer toward this life work? Or did you kind of get into it by accident? Really, I understand, appreciate your dedication and your commitment.
Yeah, thank you. I steered myself this direction. I waffled a little bit and wandered and thought like, oh, carnivore work, you know, it's hard. It is hard to get into. A lot of people want to do it. My job is fantastic. I don't take it for granted ever. But I did. I always liked working with like large mammals. I always liked working with, especially with critters where there are these really complex social and ecological dynamics. That decision science stuff I'm showing you, like that's why I'm so interested in particularly these critters, is because that's where we see the conflict, and that's where I feel like I can hopefully do research and help people work through decisions in a way that better balances those objectives and helps us live better with our wildlife neighbors.
So you also do the other large animals, right? Like elk and I
Yep.
don't know what else, all cougars or whatever.
Yeah, so my trifecta is largely bears, wolves, and elk. Those are the ones that I work with directly. Cougar, we don't have any research going on, but it's largely just because we don't have an established cougar population. We get them increasingly, I would say, seen in Wisconsin, but those so far have been largely young males, and we don't have any evidence of breeding occurring in the state.
There's another question online. What does bear hunting look like on tribal lands? So what about bears that live on both tribal land and Wisconsin land? So what's that relationship like?
Yeah, so that is managed by our tribal counterparts, like Glickwick, for example, for the Ojibwa tribes, and there is tribal harvest every year. You know, I can't speak to all of their policies. I won't try to do that, but there is a small tribal harvest every year of bear. Largely, tribes don't exercise their treaty rights, or a lot of individuals do not, because often they're part of Bear Clan, and if you're part of Bear Clan, you would not most individuals not choose to hunt or consume bear.
What's your best advice if you see a black bear in the woods?
If you're at a safe picture or if you're safe distance,
I'm leaving it way open, like, I could come up with 1,000 scenarios.
I mean, if you're in a safe distance, enjoy it. It's an amazing thing. I live in the North Woods. I don't see bear all the time. It's, you know, I would have predicted to see them more often than I do, honestly. But it's a special thing to get to see a bear from a safe distance. If you're not at a safe distance, go at a safe distance. I'm sorry, that's not more insightful.
What is a safe distance?
Yeah.
Yards.
Yeah, I would say at least 50 yards away. And then, I mean, if it was me, I'd be reading language too. I would get away in enough distance that they don't seem stressed out. If they're looking at you, they seem tense, if they're pacing, anything like that, you're too close for their comfort, and you should definitely back off. Because, you know, if another motivating thing there, right, is that if a bear attacks a person, there's going to be repercussions for that bear as well. So it's also, we can't communicate to a bear that we mean no harm, right? So I feel like it's our responsibility to try to reduce any potential conflicts, right? So we back off.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
That's
Jen.
very.
Yeah, thank you all. This has been fun. And I will need to get my collar back though. And you can go on a bear.
There.
Thanks, everybody.